I'm going completely crazy.
David!
What?
Now, I'm really sorry to be upsetting you, but I have to warn you.
Warn me?
We were attacked by a werewolf.
I'm not listening to this.
On the moors, we were attacked by a lycanthrope, a werewolf. I was murdered, an unnatural death. And now I walk the earth in limbo until the werewolf's curse is lifted.
Shut up.
The wolf's bloodline must be severed. The last remaining werewolf must be destroyed. It's you, David.
What?
Please believe me. You'll kill people.
Nurse!
Listen to me!
Nurse!
The supernatural, the power of darkness, it's all true. The undead surround me. Have you ever talked to a corpse? It's boring. I'm lonely. Take your life, David. Kill yourself before you kill others.
This is the emergency podcast system. This is not a test. Movies are bombing all over the country. They are posing as movies you already know. They may already be in your theaters, your neighbor's home, or even your own. Do not panic. Specialists have been dispatched. They will help you identify these pretenders and defend you against this invasion of the remake. Please stand by for further instructions.
Welcome to the Invasion of the Remake podcast. I am your host, Jason Bishop, and today we are going to be talking about dogmen, lycans, lycanthropes, otherwise known as werewolves. And should have known that was coming.
For the record, I didn't do it.
Howling at the Moon was Jeff Omega.
Wolfman Jeff.
And Trish Coughlin.
Yeah, Wolf Mother Trish.
Wolf Mother Trish. Oh, that's better than what I had in my head.
Oh, what did you have?
I'll save it for later.
Okay.
It's going to get him in trouble, Trish. Trust
Exactly. That's why I'm not going to do it. Sometimes you just...
Bits of the SS related?
Oh, that's pretty good too.
Okay.
Nope.
See, now I'm just adding. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, you're making it worse. Like I
really am.
Well, that's actually getting worse than what was in my head. So, and Sam, save us, Sam.
I'm just the resident hairy bastard.
Yeah.
Well,
You're the most wolf-like of all of us, I think.
Probably, except for the hair on the top of my head's missing.
I guess it depends when the last time you had a haircut.
Well, several months ago.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I have my barber does home visits, so I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm all shaved up now.
Well, I typically only get mine cut once a year too. So.
Oh well, that's true.
Yeah.
You hippie bastard.
No, it's lazy and cheap.
So this week we're going to be continuing our special where, normally this would be convention season for us and we'd be picking up some interviews and stuff, and yeah, that ain't happening anywhere. So we thought we'd throw a few little specials out this month where we get just to chat about things we normally won't be able to get to chat about unless we're doing a comparison on that theme. So it's kind of fun just to hit some of our favorite genres and directors, and this week, it was like last week was Trish's birthday, and she went to walk with the wolves, as it were. Dance with the wolves, even. Did you frolic, maybe?
Well, no, they take you to a little area, and they give you, treats to give them, and you sort of sit in this, enclosed area, and the ones that have more dog in them come a lot closer. Mm-hmm. So that's that whole breeding part, but a lot of times you're kind of throwing it to them, and then... that was in the high wolf level enclosure where there's only one with a high dog, low wolf, and you can tell because he's chubby because he comes in for all the treats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, you kind of just feed them out of your hand. and you get to learn all about them. And then in the second enclosure, you see ones that are like high dog, low wolf, and there's one high wolf in there, and she stays back. But the other guys, there's this big one called Rocky, and he's very picky about his treats. You have to make him sit to give them to him. But if you offer him the wrong one, the look of disdain, just utter disdain.
I didn't want that one.
How
dare you.
That.
Now,
That?
our longtime listeners may know this about Trish at this point. Now she's danced with wolves and swam with sharks. I have a feeling you would like run with velociraptors if you could.
Pretty much, yeah. I would do velociraptors if they had like muzzles on them.
Okay, so you actually don't want to get eaten. That's good.
No, I'm good. Velociraptors are a little harder to manage.
One would think.
You have to worry about those
run with
claws.
wolves? What other dangerous stuff can I do?
Yeah, Trish runs with predators.
Yes.
I do. I've run with predators. I've jumped out of a plane.
That's her native name is runs with predators.
Runs with predators. Yeah, maybe some bears. Get in with a bear. Some tigers.
Oh shit, we gave her ideas.
Yes.
I was just thinking, this is the new, APTN show like Manhunter, but it's Trish runs with predators.
Yes.
Coming to a podcast network near you.
Woohoo!
It could be a short one.
Yeah.
See, I want to call it like Where the Wild Things Are. I like that better.
I don't know why I had this image of like Daffy Duck doing that stage thing where he's trying to wow the crowd and do something to dazzle them more than Bugs Bunny is, and then he blows himself up.
Yep.
He's like, well, problem with that trick is I can only do it once.
I don't know. Maybe I just have a slightly self-destructive streak.
Okay. Well, we watched a whole lot of werewolf movies this week, and, I'm a big fan of werewolves. Werewolves are part of our culture. It stretches back to the beginning of man. Like, there are cave drawings of men turning into animals, and werewolves are just part of that lore. There's lots in Greek myth, and around the 14th century France, I think it was 14th century, maybe a little later, 30,000 people were accused of being werewolves. The myth of your eyebrows meeting, never trust that dude, because he's probably a werewolf. I'm sure like this legend stretches back to us suppressing and or embracing our animal nature as human beings. We've pushed that back, and this is letting loose of the primal nature. Now, film has certainly changed the lore over time, and it's created a life of its own, but the cycles of the moon are certainly part of the werewolf myth prior to film. I mean, most people can associate with people getting a little crazy when the full moon is out, also known as lunacy, lunatics, luna being moon. Yeah, that's where that comes from, guys.
And I wanted to just add one thing, something also learned at the Wolf Dog Sanctuary. High wolf content animals, they stay away from humans. They really don't want anything to do with us. They stay very far away.
Well, that's a learned trait, because they've learned to fear man because they were hunted for their pelts. And
absolutely.
Yeah, so it's an instinctual thing to fear man, and as well they should. We kind of suck sometimes.
Yeah, we do. And like that's the thing, the movies, it's like these evil werewolves like attacking humans, and it's like, I don't know, like maybe it's the human part that's killing humans, because the wolf part just wants to fuck off.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's going to be the interesting nature of the films as we explore what we've watched, where some werewolves are more animalistic, and then you get into the underworld ones where the pack has a little more intelligence and design to what they're doing and control of their form. So we're going to probably hit all of those and everything in between with what we've watched. There's certainly some classic ones, as stretching back to the Universal films. Actually, Universal's first one was called Werewolf of London, which
one of my favorite werewolf movies, actually.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool movie. It actually watches. I think I've talked about it on our last 31 Days of Horror, and that one's more of in tune of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but it is very much of changing against your will and embracing a more animalistic nature, but it watches more like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of movie. Of course, Lon Chaney Jr. would be iconic after that about a decade later. So, I want to know what everybody watched. I had a big week because
You did.
I don't do anything in half measures, apparently. So I watched 14 werewolf movies, which is nuts. But, everybody after Stephen King week was probably well aware that, yeah, Jason's sane.
But in a good way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't go as overboard, but I still got 9 in, which is a lot of watching still.
Yeah, when we do 31 Days of Horror, I think that's a lot. And then, you do half of that in a week. And you're like, oh, it's really not a lot.
I think it's because you're doing less. When you've got something you're really into, there's less hit and miss.
Well, with work right now, too, we're still in our COVID hours, so I'm home a little earlier, so I'm eating dinner a little earlier, so I'm getting things done a little earlier and having a little more time to watch this stuff. So as things get later and later, this is going to be harder and harder to do. So once I get back to my normal schedule, it's I'd probably go back to 1 in the evening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, who should start? I mean, you've got a huge amount.
I'll take the tail on this one, but let's start with Jeff, because I think he had the least, but he's also an aficionado like myself.
Yeah, so with this whole past week, I had a lot going on, so I watched less movies in general, but I did finally watch the final Ginger Snaps movie, Ginger Snaps Back, the beginning, and it was all right.
That one I always felt was the weakest of the trilogy.
Yeah.
But it was interesting as well because it brings it back to, was it set around the 1800s?
Yeah, it was
despite having the same cast.
A fairly accurate 1890s or 1880s, I'm guessing. It takes place in a fort and, living in Alberta. And the movie also being shot in Alberta. There's definitely, you recognize a lot of things in that movie from, just stuff you've seen living in this area, which was kind of neat. Mm-hmm. But generally I do think it's the weakest of the three. But the first Ginger Snaps I do really, really love, and I'd actually say might be the best overall werewolf movie that I've seen.
I'd be tempted to agree with you, or at least top 5 like that. I revisited that first one from director John Fawcett, who, by the way, is the cousin to our very own friend Tyler, who's guested on the show a couple of times.
Oh.
Yeah.
I always forget that.
I have a little Canadian block on my werewolf movies. So I got 3 Canadian ones in there, but Ginger Snaps was always part of it because it's such a homegrown one for us. It's the closest to home for us of being an Alberta made movie. But to attach the idea of the werewolf to a coming of age and your first cycle as a woman as well. So not just the cycle of the werewolf, but the cycle of being a woman as a whole. So it's such a neat idea, and I think it's one of those movies that really probably brought women into the werewolf genre. I mean, women love horror in general, but I find more women than men love horror, which is weird because I always seem the women who don't watch horror think it's usually guys that watch horror. And, and it's so exploitive. I'm like, yeah, but that's what women like about it too. They get it.
Well, and you talk about the whole women and bringing it into the cycle of being a woman.
Yeah.
And it's having never not seen this in movies before, it was really cool to see, because I mean, you spend there's part of your every month there's blood. Mm-hmm. There's blood in your life, and then there's moments where you're just the levels of your hormones, you're a bit more aggressive because you're I'm just done with shit. You feel the pain, so the transformation. I'm surprised it never got tied in before that, because it really does all fit together so nicely mythologically.
Well, yeah, and the thing is too, and I think not only Jay mentioned earlier, the Werewolf of London being pretty Jekyll and Hyde-esque, but I would argue that more than half of all werewolf movies are just Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but with the werewolf. And I feel with Ginger Snaps, the thing that was really cool about it was, not only it was able to take a really well-worn trope, being werewolves, and basically graft it onto a very personal coming-of-age story that was very relatable to death-obsessed sisters who have a close bond, but then one of them starts to grow older and then the other one is left behind. Yeah. And there's just a really good coming-of-age story that is just so perfectly ingrained with it's also a werewolf movie. And in a way, few werewolf movies, I think, really do that successfully.
Yeah, and it's the discovery of oneself and merging that animalistic nature. As we see Ginger when she first is bitten and she's trying to discover what it is, this urge she has, and at first she uses sex. She thinks it's a sexual desire. And this is really that confusion that's coming from moving from being a girl into womanhood as well. Yeah. It's wonderfully crafted and it doesn't hit you over the head, but it's subtle and engaging as well. And it's a great movie.
It's the allegory of transformation. There's the whole point where it's before you became a werewolf to after you become a werewolf, and that's your life has changed forever before you start to menstruate and after you start to menstruate. Mm-hmm. Those are two different cycles of your life. That's life before and life after. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I kind of, now I'm thinking about this, I'm going, okay, so now I want another Ginger Snaps, but a menopausal werewolf.
It'd be interesting now that the actresses are well-established women actresses in the industry now. I mean, Ginger Snaps certainly put Catherine Isabel on the map, even though she'd been a child actor for many, many years prior to it. I think for a lot of people, that was the first place we saw her, and she's been so associated with horror ever since.
Mm-hmm. Oh, American Mary.
Mm-hmm. Most recently, there was that series on Netflix as well. She played a witch of some sort.
And I believe Emily Perkins was in the original It miniseries.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did not know that. That's cool. There's some good history and background with both these actresses for horror, so you could do a lot worse with than Ginger Snaps, that's for sure. In fact, I think that movie, I was looking at IMDb ratings that I jotted down while I was watching, and that one ties for the top-rated one on my list this week.
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
Yeah. I would probably agree with those ratings, so it is fantastic.
One thing I find with werewolf movies in general, so there are a lot of werewolf movies that are really good, as we will definitely dive into, but there's a lot of key concepts about werewolves that I think are really intriguing, that I feel like few movies ever really tap into, that I feel like are very obvious. A really, really good example of just really good werewolf fiction was actually the second Dresden Files book, Full Moon. Mm-hmm. But there's a sequence where basically this person who's going to become a werewolf, he's in a holding cell in prison, and that the main character knows he's going to turn into a werewolf and is trying to do something. And meanwhile, you have this person who turns into a werewolf and then is ripping through every single cage in succession, getting out of the prison. And it's a pretty horrifying sequence, but it's the two things that I really like about werewolves, which is being in a place you can't control when it's your time to turn into a werewolf, and then other people where they're trapped in a room with a werewolf, where it might be someone it might not be, but there's nowhere for you to go, and that that's not a person anymore. And both of those are huge aspects to what I think make werewolves scary. And I think Being Human, the TV show, does it really, really well.
Yes. Are you referring to the US version or the UK version?
The UK one. I actually haven't seen the US one yet, but...
yeah. No, I've only watched the UK one as well.
I'd seen a little bit of the US one. I didn't like it. I like the UK one.
Yeah.
But that's usually what happens with American remakes of British TV shows. They might have a little more success with film, but for the most part, they botch it. Hey, look, we talked about a remake.
and
it feels like it's been weeks.
True. Russell Tovey is he's just really good in that role as somebody really struggling with what he's got.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And that one, there's lots of stuff where, he doesn't, his watch breaks or something, and he doesn't realize that he's going to turn in 20 minutes and he's watching after his girlfriend's daughter, and just stuff like that, which is just really, really good dramatic tension.
Cool. What else did you watch?
Actually, I watched a little bit of Being Human this week. See, I finished off Ginger Snaps, rewatched the first Howling, which was great. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie.
It's been a long time for me, too, and I haven't revisited in a long time, so it's pretty hazy in my head at this point. Oh. But that spawned, 5, 6 sequels?
7.
Yeah.
7.
There's 7. And I haven't seen any of the other ones.
Right.
Even though I like Christopher Lee.
This is my crossover. I also
mine
watched
too.
it.
Yeah, I was pretty sure this one's going to be on everybody else's list as well, or just about everybody else's list, because it is such an iconic horror.
I had intended to, but I didn't. But one of my favorite double features is watching The Howling and then Wolfen. So that's another double feature favorite of mine.
Those are two very different movies.
They're very.
I
different
definitely
movies.
think that the first Howling is it's pretty much unlike every single of its successors.
They get progressively worse. And I thought I'd seen The Howling, and I was watching. I'm like, you know what? I don't remember seeing this. And I think I started with The Howling 3 because I was working in the video store and it came out on video. And I'm like, yeah, I'll check this out. And didn't really like it very much, so I never went back.
But that's when that one by that point it turned into like cheesy direct-to-video Scream Queen fare.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm in the exact same boat, Sam. I think I did exactly what you did with 3 with the marsupials.
Yes.
I believe it's 3.
Oh, right. I remember that.
And then not remembering, I didn't watch The Howling. I watched the transformation on YouTube, but which made me think I saw it, but I didn't.
Yeah, no, and I really enjoyed it. It was up until my second last movie. It was my favorite movie of the week. It was just even though it's dated, it's still really solid.
I remember the Robert Picardo transformation being really impressive until you watch American Werewolf in London. But at the for the time, it was like, oh wow, that's a pretty cool transformation.
That was the problem. Was The Howling came out and it was really, really good, but then American Werewolf in London, I think, came out not that long afterwards and just completely overshadowed it.
Rick Baker kicked its ass.
Yeah,
Rick Baker
it's exactly like Dark City and The Matrix.
Rick Baker was actually doing the makeup on The Howling until he actually left the production to go do American Werewolf in London. I think that's why it looks so good, is because he sort of started the makeup and then handed it off to an understudy, basically.
I do remember that movie was like initially the way they sold that movie was they had promised a one-shot, one-take werewolf transformation, and then they couldn't do it. You watch the movie, it doesn't watch that way. They do have cutaways, but I think that's how they initially got that movie funded. It was just a bald-faced lie.
Well, one thing
overly optimistic.
Yeah, overly optimistic. I'm sure it wasn't a bald-faced lie at the time. They really probably thought they could, and it probably didn't work.
At the very least, even though I think the transformation sequence is better in American Werewolf, I do think that the actual werewolf itself looks better in The Howling.
I agree with that, actually.
Well, that actually brings up something interesting. As a whole, werewolves look kind of silly on screen. It's really tough to do them well and make them scary looking, which is probably why a lot of the time when I watched a lot of these movies, they kept them in shadows. At least these earlier ones or these low budget ones, they kept them in shadows in the dark for most of it, so you didn't see too much detail, at least for these horror ones, because it does kind of come off a bit silly.
Yeah, even with CGI, they're not able to sort of really give you something that truly does look as terrifying as you would imagine them to be.
Yeah.
And actually,
it's a struggle between two items that are hard to conform. Like, they want to make it look with the face of a wolf with a long nose, but still have something vaguely human about it. And then two, there's always been an uncertainty whenever I watch a werewolf movie. Is this going to be a on all fours werewolf? Or is this going to be a walking around on two legs werewolf?
That's usually a question, and then I'm like, is it going to be flat-faced werewolf or snout werewolf?
Exactly.
And it's one of those
always
things.
A thing.
Yeah.
It's just like whatever the director or whatever the writer prefers and wants to propagate about werewolf mythology, but everybody's at odds with each other.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I have an interesting one where they don't actually transform at all. In my watches.
I think I know which one that one is. I never got to it, but is that the one you recommended to me?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I wonder which one that is.
Oh.
I will tell you. It's my turn.
But I do have one thing to ask about The Howling. When Dee Wallace changes at the end, I love the beginning of her transformation, but then the end when she's actually werewolf formed, it looks like a little teddy bear.
Yes.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like, it's too adorable, and I know I should feel sad she gets shot, and I do, but I'm like going, it would be hard to kill a werewolf, but it's hard to kill a very adorable werewolf.
I actually have one where it's got a nice sexy werewolf. Like, their design was like, hey, they made them look different and attractive. Or this one was attractive because she was attractive as a human.
Nice.
It was interesting. I'm like, oh, I'm attracted to the fur.
Strangely, I feel like my favorite werewolf design in any movie that I've seen, other than, like the classic stuff that's classic for a reason, like Wolfman and stuff. But I think the best actual werewolf design is in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Oh.
That one wasn't bad. I don't know. He's a bit gangly
bad.
for my taste.
A bit, but like they really did capture a good synthesis between a man and a wolf that I feel like everybody just has a hard time nailing. Even though you're right, like you're saying that they look kind of silly on screen. What can be so hard about, like, a wolf is scary and you can make men turning into other scary animals scary. Like, why can't you make a man into a wolf convincingly?
I'd argue that some of these movies certainly have done that and done
Definitely.
that successfully. So
Definitely.
yeah. Whereas you got something like An American Werewolf in London with this wonderful synthesis of humor while still keeping the movie quite scary at times, especially with that final transformation scene, which I'm sure Sam will mention later because I think he watched almost everything from 1981.
I did do the trifecta, yes.
What a year for werewolf stuff, considering it was at a time when people didn't want to admit they were making a werewolf movie.
Yeah. But
And then everybody did it.
Yeah, 3 of them in 1 year, and all 3 were incredible films.
So, Jeff, do you got any others that you watch before we move along here?
No,
We're
let's
starting to
move
tease.
along. We'll comment on the things as they are coming up.
Okay. Well, I know
A little bit. Not much.
Sam's already set up some stuff, so let's move into 1981 and beyond with Sam.
Yay! Yeah, so, I mean, we already talked about the 1981 trifecta, which was Wolfen, The Howling, and American Werewolf in London. So I had never seen Wolfen.
That was my final watch.
I know that I'd started to watch Wolfen in the past, and I'm like, this is boring. And it's interesting how your perspective changes from being in your early 20s or teenager to being a more mature adult and really enjoying it. It was such a great mystery on top of the mythology and adding in some other aspect, the spiritualness of the creatures
This was more of a
often.
Yeah, this was more of a native take of spiritualism and probably a little bit of skinwalkers dashed in there, the Wolfen being something unique because it wasn't a traditional werewolf movie in that sense, as they were more spirits that were attacking the people who were destroying the land. It's a very much an environmental themed movie, despite being this long murder mystery as well.
Yeah, and Albert Finney's hair.
It was insane.
It was just awful.
Especially when he first is introduced and he's got the headband.
Oh, gee.
Oh,
yeah,
Lord.
that was brutal. And the jogging pants and stuff like that. It's like, oh, Finney, you should never have let them dress you like that.
But as soon as he starts talking, you're like, oh, that's why they cast him. He looks ridiculous, but he's so good.
He is so good. He is so good. And Gregory Hines in only his second film role was just excellent.
It's actually a really amazing cast because you got Albert Finney, Edward James Olmos, Gregory Hines, Tom Noonan. That's a big cast movie for a rather probably hard to sell plot that got it off, and it was the only feature, like fictional feature, that the screenwriter and director Michael Wadley had done, because he was like the guy instrumental in Woodstock and getting that off the ground and did the document. He was a documentary filmmaker, and that's why it has such a real look to it, because he's using probably these real locations in this kind of burnt out areas of New York.
Yeah, I only had a couple minor beefs with the movie. One was almost as a native, because he's not. And even in 1981, there were still plenty of native actors that they could have gone with. As wonderful as Almost was in the role, given today's climate especially, it's like, oh, that's really a little bit off-putting. Because it does seem like they missed an opportunity there. And the other, and believe it or not, is just a little nitpicky thing, is whenever they're up on the native steelworkers, which is something that does happen still, is natives tend to be the sort of high-rise steelworkers. Why would they just hang out at the top of a bridge? Why didn't they use a construction site, which is where they would have actually been? But otherwise, I don't think that I had any issues with this movie. I think it was pretty flawless in terms of telling a story.
Yeah, I think it's just underrated, and especially considering all the werewolf movies of the time, it's the one that got forgotten, and it shouldn't be. It's a really great movie. I wouldn't call it a werewolf movie per se. It's more of like flavored that way.
Yeah, it's pardon the pun, but it's a spiritual werewolf movie rather than an actual werewolf movie.
Yeah. And fun fact that the werewolf vision, because you're getting it from, or the wolf vision, wolf and vision, it's very similar to the predator vision from the Schwarzenegger film with the heat, with that look and feel, and did it before Predator did it. So
yeah, and they did some interesting use of color there instead of just giving you sort of the regular heat signature. I love that they used like the softer, like cooler colors, like purples and blues. Mm-hmm. I thought that gave it a really neat look, and you knew what you were looking through the eyes of the wolfen.
There's one thing that's really effective in that movie that's always haunted me from the first day I saw it. Like, I would go back to it once in a while because it is a slow burn and kind of boring, especially when you're a younger movie, as you said, and I totally get that. But there's one thing that always scared the pants off me as a kid. Like, there's the opening scene, Gregory Hines, he says something about when this victim, the first attack that spawns the murder mystery, had lost his head, and he's like, yeah, if it happens fast enough and you've got enough oxygen still in your brain, you can see your body falling as your head is also hitting the ground and trying to scream. Yeah. And you know that you're going to see it. Like, you don't see it in that opening scene, but it does happen to somebody else near the end. And it's a terrifying scene. It still bothers me when I watch that scene.
You know, I have to agree with you that head coming off the body scene is affecting. Yeah, in a different way than the one in American Werewolf, which I still find funny. I did laugh out loud again last night when I was watching it.
Nice.
Yeah, there's funny decapitations and unfunny ones, and this one
surprisingly, yes,
and it looked really good.
Yes, it did. Yeah, no, it is really affecting.
Yeah, terrifying movie.
Orion Pictures presents Wolfen. For centuries, they have been hiding in the rubble of your cities. The concealed threat. The invisible terror.
Chris! You scared me.
They can sense the rhythm of your blood. Hear clouds pass overhead. See where you are blind. A force so deadly, it will tear the scream from your throat. Wherever you are, they are.
Somewhere in the world, every other day, a corporate executive is assassinated.
Team her up with Wilson.
Murphy or Mahoney, I'm comfortable with.
You're uncomfortable?
With surprises.
There's not a trace, not a speck of metal. Nothing softer could have ripped and ravaged like this.
Is it an animal?
Well, it ain't human. Do you realize how many people disappeared without a trace? Something out there might be eating people.
Did you hear that?
Yeah! Get out of there!
What do you think it was?
You were being lured. We were being separated.
By what?
The carnivore. You got yourself some kind of meat eater. Meat eater.
What is it?
It's Wolfen. They're only animals. They might be gods. In their eyes, you are the savage. Wolfen.
The other 1981 was The Howling, which we already sort of touched base on, which was, like I said, up to the point of the one that I'm going to talk about last, I think, or second last, was my favorite. It just still stands up so well. Even though I had some issues with the story, I would have liked to have seen a little more of the hunt for Ed, the serial killer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I agree. I think that was the best part of the movie.
Yeah, the ending I almost missed his comeuppance because kind of just sort of let him sort of slide into the story and didn't really take that story anywhere as far as I was concerned. So that would be, if we were remaking it, that's something I would be fixing. I would be making better use of. Otherwise, it's a pretty good film.
Because that's always what I remember about that movie too.
Yeah, no, because I thought, oh, this is going into some really interesting places, and it didn't really go to those interesting places I was expecting. And then, of course, the last of 1981 was American Werewolf in London. We've talked about that many times, briefly, touched on it quite a bit because it is such a well-known werewolf film, and it's still a highly enjoyable watch. And I like the ending of this one. It's very similar to The Howling, where the ending is kind of tragic because it follows the story of this man's transformation and the horror that he's going through. And then, of course, if you haven't seen it, spoilers, his tragic ending, it does end in his death. So,
but there's that added layer that no other movie's done, that all the victims that have died of this werewolf are trapped in purgatory until the last werewolf of that line is killed. So he has to die to free these spirits that are trapped and haunting him.
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention, because that's probably my favorite aspect of the movie, aside from the look and the feel of the film, because it is, for one of the earlier Landis works, it's incredible. And I mean, it's obviously, there's a bit of that homage to Werewolf in London there in terms of the title and the location. It's certainly a very different movie, though.
Yeah, and we'll get to revisit this as a whole in a much longer conversation, because John Landis' son is currently scripting a remake and is set to direct a remake of American Werewolf in London. So I am very much looking forward to spending an entire episode talking about that movie.
Exactly.
Because I totally could.
Oh, and Griffin Dunn, his best buddy, showing up increasingly looking more and more disgusting. I think is the funniest part of that movie.
It is. He's the highlight of the film. The one thing I did notice this time watching it, because it has been a while since I have watched it, is David Naughton really wasn't a very good actor. At least at that point in his career, he was kind of stiff. His line deliveries were a little awkward sometimes, except for when he was on screen with Griffin Dunn. Griffin Dunn's kind of brought him up to a better level of acting. And I, to be honest with you, even though David Naughton's had a lengthy career, I don't remember anything else that he's been in.
What about that wonderful Dr. Pepper commercial I used?
Yes.
But you're right. I can't think of much else either. I'm sure I've seen stuff, but the most memorable stuff would be American Werewolf in London. Did anybody watch American Werewolf in Paris for this?
Not recently. I have seen it, but I
remember seeing it the one time, and I'm like, nope, never again. It just diminishes the original.
No,
it's so bad.
It is. Yeah, it was a fuck you movie.
Yeah.
And honestly, it has so many problems with, I've been to Paris and I've been to the Eiffel Tower, and I have problems. I'm like, no base jumping off there. No.
So it's all scarred us. All right, let's continue on with Sam's list here.
There we go. So that was the 1981 trifecta. So that was a full third of the movies I watched.
And that's crazy. Just like, that is just 1981. Like, the 80s in general had a lot of werewolves. But 81, and considering The Howling, when they released that movie, they didn't want people to know it was a werewolf movie, and a very classic werewolf movie at that, because at that time they were afraid it was going to be viewed as cliched and old. And here we have three in the same year.
Yeah, and they did, arguably one of the best years for werewolf films ever. And it certainly did spawn a movement of inferior werewolf films through the 80s. I would say.
Oh, I have a question. Which do you think came first? Do you think the 80s hair inspired the werewolves, or the werewolves inspired the 80s hair?
Are you saying werewolves inspired the mullet?
I think it might have happened that way. I think we need to blame something. And I
am happy to say I have got some amazing hair in my list, including a werewolf with a mullet, and there's one that's like pretty styling early 2000s hair, werewolf hair. I'm like, oh my god, they kept their hair in the transformation. That's amazing. So we'll get there. Sam might even know that one.
Probably, we'll see when you get to it.
I'm pretty sure. I think you even recommended it to me, but I'd already seen it. It was just that was a few years ago.
Then chances are I probably will remember it.
Yeah.
So I started off with one that sounded really interesting on paper.
Oh no!
And I did mention it to you because it does have Barry Boschwick and Kane Hodder in it, and your response was, "You can have that one. Fuck Kane."
Yeah, me and Kane have issues.
Yeah. But it was a really It's a really interesting idea, and I think I'd like to consider this for a remake because conceptually, it's got a lot of potential. It's called Project Metal Beast, and essentially what they do is it starts off with them hunting a werewolf. They capture it, and they're trying to militarize lycanthropy. So this sort of arrogant military specialist infects himself with werewolf blood and becomes a werewolf, and then ends up getting put into stasis because he's uncontrollable. 20 years later, they've developed this super skin, I guess. So it makes their skin indestructible. And they merge a werewolf and they give him this metal skin that looks like real skin. So they've now made a super werewolf. And it sounds really interesting, but wasn't.
This sounds like something the Asylum would come up with.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like I'm like going. This sounds like so much fun, but they just wasted it.
But it sounds amazing.
Doesn't it though?
In my head, I'm also going like where you do kind of like an android. When you said metal werewolf, I'm like, oh yeah, no. And then they like give him other like metal parts to like militarize him.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was envisioning in my head when I sort of briefly read the synopsis. I'm like, oh yeah, I got to see this. But no, it doesn't really quite materialize that way. It wastes some pretty talented actors. I mean, you have Barry Boschwick, who chews up the scenery in this movie, is by far the best part. The supporting cast, it's all throwaway. Like I don't really feel like there's a lot of development in them, which for a low budget film from 1995, it could have been better, but it bears potentially revisiting for something else.
Nice.
My other, I did do two others that Jay has done, so I'm sure we'll get into these. And Trish, I know you love these movies. I did watch Wolf Cop and another Wolf Cop.
Yay!
Finally, I got to see them. I love the first one.
Part of my Canadian contingent.
Yeah. The first one is a really fun horror comedy take on the werewolf trope, and I liked the whole sort of mystical aspect of the town that's been run by these demigod-like beings, I guess is the best way of putting it, for centuries. And one of the ways that they do that is through that sacrifice of a werewolf to extend their lives and give them their shape-changing abilities of their own. I found that really an interesting concept. I think maybe it wasn't as well utilized as it could have been. But yeah, I love the cast is great in the first one. I think Terry is the name of the gun shop owner. Yeah, I found him hugely entertaining, and I was so happy when they found a way to bring him back for the second one.
Oh, with his talking penis?
With his talking penis.
I haven't seen the second one yet. I need to do that.
See, this is why we do werewolves, because when else am I going to say the words talking penis?
And it's...
It even had the same... Yeah, it even had the same mustache.
Yes, yeah, it was highly entertaining, and I do have to say, like I said, Kevin Smith makes a very lengthy cameo in the remake or in the sequel, I should say.
Yeah, to plug the chicken beer, chicken milk.
Chicken milk.
He likes to pop a cold cock.
Yes, but interestingly enough, the alien penis looks very similar to the Hitler schnitzels in Yoga Hosers.
Oh, and Kevin was in another Wolf Cop first.
Yes. Yeah, so I wonder if maybe they collaborated on it a little bit. But yeah, it's you said there's a lot more dick jokes, and my response is it is just one long dick joke.
For the most part. Actually, you had a good comparison to this to another Canadian classic that we have covered on this show.
I made a comparison to a Canadian classic?
Yes.
Strange Brew?
That would be the one.
Oh, yes, of course, yeah. It is like the werewolf version of Strange Brew. It really is. Right down to the hockey.
And the robots?
And the robots.
Well, yeah, like
cyborgs. Cyborgs, yeah.
The lack of Shakespeare references I'm wondering about.
Yeah, there's not a lot of that, but yeah, the basic storyline, there's a definite parallel there for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure they were trying to do the werewolf comparison. They were like, everybody loved Wolf Cop, we gotta do a sequel, let's make Strange Brew. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
now I just got Shakespeare in my head. Two penis or not two penis? That is the question. It's nobler in the mind to suffer a barrage of dick jokes.
Yeah, and there are a lot of them. And there's also a were-cat. Like, don't get me wrong, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, but you have to be in dumb mode to enjoy it.
That was actually part of my Canadian contingent, but that was my entire... I had 3 movies of, like, dumb werewolf movies, and I had a blast watching all of them.
Nice.
Woodhaven has more than it can handle.
Think we'll see any action tonight?
Oh, Scott, you need to learn. In this job, it's not about looking for action, it's about preventing it.
Merry Christmas!
More violence. More sex.
Is that my sister?
More liquor. More explosion. More donuts, more hair, more hockey.
You're a wolf. I think you're missing the bigger issue here, though.
Heads where I can see him.
Did we mention chicken milk?
Slamical God!
What do you know about shapeshifters? Reptilioid dudes, man. Smells like old people.
More blood.
Damn it, Daisy.
Did we mention explosions? Now, more than ever, Woodhaven needs dirtier, hairier, another wolf cop.
Someone stole our donuts.
Brought to you by Liquor Donuts and Wolf Cop Lager. Brewed angry.
I have a strange connection with Wolf Cop, actually. So the guy Emerson Ziffel, who did the all the makeup effects, strangely enough, he used to work at this dinosaur museum in Saskatchewan, and he used to live in this town there, volunteering for the RSM, like the Royal Saskatchewan Museum. And the guy who he worked with, kind of turned him on to horror movies and makeup effects and all that stuff. And he left and went his own way. But the same year that he left, I worked at the same place that he worked at. And the same person who turned him on to a lot of his horror movie likes and stuff is the same person who turned me on to pretty much everything horror that I really like, and a lot of comics and a whole bunch of stuff. And it was just really bizarre. And we met afterwards and talked about it a little bit. That just we were both had this strange connection of this being in this town of 600 people, but never crossing paths while we were there. But while they were trying to get Wolf Cop funded, we ended up bumping into each other. And it was just a strange thing. So I think about it every time I see that movie or his name pop up.
And actually, Trish and I both met him at Calgary Expo. When they were getting this funded, we actually have a handmade badge that Emerson had made for promoting it. And,
me too.
And
it's in my kitchen.
We got it all signed a few years ago when they came back, I think, promoting another Wolf Cop. And I love those guys because they'll come in and Leo Fafard will get in full Wolf Cop makeup to walk the floor of the convention. And he's just an insane dude as a whole. So there wasn't a lot of typecasting there. He pretty much was that dude. But and that was the first time I got to see Wolf Cop was at the convention.
Yes,
totally.
with the crowds. So in a weird little room, but. It was kind of cool. The first time when they were getting it funded, we had done an interview with them, and Richard and I on a previous show helped promote that movie to help get it funded. And to get that badge, I had to howl like a werewolf in the hall, and just to get that badge. And I'm like, yeah, I'm more than willing to embarrass myself to get something cool because it's got the claw marks through it. It's really awesome. Yeah. So now I have it sitting in on a little display in my kitchen. Above my dishes and stuff, and I have Freddy's glove holding that badge.
Amazing.
Yeah. It made me think, Jeff, your story, you guys both got bit by the same horror fan, and he turned you into horror fans.
Absolutely.
It's very werewolf.
That is.
Yeah.
It's the spreading of the disease. Well done, Trish. Well spotted. You're going to be on the werewolf hunt with us for sure, because you'll be good to track it.
I will. That's why I went to the Wolf Dog Sanctuary. Just research, guys. Just research.
All right. Continue on with your list, Sam.
Okay.
That was quite the segue.
Yeah, it works. So my next movie was one that's been on my list for a long time, and it was the first one that I sort of saw that addressed sort of the werewolf as family sort of concept. It was Blood and Chocolate from, I think, 2013.
Nice.
Oh, that was in my pile. I just didn't get to it. It's been a long time since I've seen it.
Me too.
Yeah, it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. It has a very young Hugh Dancy in it. Conceptually, I like the whole idea of where they really address pack, because the wolves are pack animals. So this is the first one that really sort of addressed that for me. I mean, The Howling touches on it, but this one really addresses it, and where you have your alpha male and you have your aspiring alpha male, the younger one who wants to be the leader of the pack and can't wait for his turn to lead the pack, but he's immature and he does stupid things, and in the end it gets him killed. Kind of trope. Like there's a lot of tropes in there, but they work fairly well for the film. I think that there's a romance in there that feels a little bit forced. But on the whole, I think it was a pretty decent werewolf movie. It's one of those werewolf movies where they kind of copped out on the transformations and the effects, where they just sort of use a light effect as they jump and they turn into a mist and then they become real wolves. They're not trying to anthropomorphize the wolf. They just become straight up wolves.
Now, the real question is, where's the chocolate come in?
The lead character, the young lady that sort of the story focuses on, her aunt, who she lives with, runs a chocolate shop. And there's actually a specific line in there where somebody says it's like blood and chocolate. And so that's where the title comes from.
And wasn't this shortly after like Chocolat came out?
Around, well, no, it was a few years later, because Chocolat was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and this is a little bit later on. And it is based on a book. So that was called Blood and Chocolate. And that is, so yeah, I think it's just coincidental. It does take place in Belgium, I believe.
Oh, so it's chocolate. There you go.
Yeah. One thing that I found really interesting about this one, which is different from almost every werewolf film I've ever seen, is they talk about how in that part of the world, werewolves are not feared, they're worshipped, they're revered, right? There's actually a church in it that is devoted to werewolves. It's now been abandoned and is closed to the public and stuff like that, but there are scenes that take place inside of it. And they talk about that mythology, how the tradition of shapeshifting is actually something that's more worshipped than scary. But at the same time, they also explain how they became hunted as the world sort of became less insular. These other cultures came in and almost destroying the werewolf bloodlines. And this is sort of the last werewolf pack that lives in Belgium. I did it like that. There's lots of sort of references to the mythology that I really enjoyed. My second last movie is the one that I recommended to Jay, and I recommend it to anybody who likes movies, not just werewolf movies, but movies. It's called Were. It's W-E-R. I'm not entirely sure how they pronounce it, but it's this really interesting sort of combination of primal fear and a werewolf film. And there's one other sort of...
It's like surgical. Like, this was my first watch. I watched Were too.
Didn't you enjoy it?
Oh, I loved it.
It was so good.
It goes into like the science of it, because there's also, they mentioned porphyria, which is an actual condition where people grow excessive hair, and was often and has been attributed where people think people are werewolves.
Exactly. So yeah, there's so much thought put into this movie, just in terms of the way the story was told, and like I love the fact that you had sort of this courtroom drama happening along with this investigation as to what he really is, and then his escape, and it's just so good. And I love the fact that they didn't turn into wolves necessarily. I mean, certainly, I can't remember his name now. Talon. There we go. He certainly looks wolf-like. He's hairy and he's kind of matted and huge. He's a big man. And then you put him in juxtaposition with the other werewolf that ultimately appears, and their contrast was just so visually appealing.
And it's also that whole thing too, where it was, because it's that courtroom drama where they're discussing how they decided to arrest him. And it also kind of touches on the persecution of people for being different and unusual.
Oh, and that was the other part. There's also a little bit of an Aaron Brockovich feel to it as well, because you have that whole taking over the murder that took place years before to try and acquire that land. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff all happening. And so there's very much a conspiracy happening, as well as the werewolf story and the courtroom drama. And it just worked surprisingly well.
I have one question for you about it as well. When the guy keeps rewatching the footage of the one guy where he got scraped on the arm.
Yes.
I don't know if it's because I was watching it on my laptop, and I kept rewinding to try and kind of see exactly what they saw. I didn't see the scrape happen. Was that just me?
It might be just because you were watching on your laptop, because on my larger screen, you could see that the contact that Talon made with, now I can't remember his name.
I want to say Gavin.
Gavin or Jeremy or something like that. But sorry, I don't write down names. I just enjoy the movies. But yeah, when they do show that he actually makes contact with him with one of his nails.
Yeah, see, because for some reason it's because I'm so used to like double crosses in movies. I kept suspecting the commissaire to be one of the wolves.
But yeah, it turns out to be a completely different kind of villain, and I enjoyed that too. I do want to admit that I was really surprised, because before his transformation, the Gavin, Jeremy, whatever his name is, guy, he looked really unassuming, right? With his glasses, and he kind of looks, I thought he was kind of small. And then when you show him with his head shaved and his shirt off, and it's like, holy shit, he does not look like that when he has a shirt on.
No, he went full split, like James McAvoy.
Again, it just makes it so much more effective because he's like shirtless and ripped and pale against this sort of dark, towering behemoth. Yeah, it works so incredibly well.
And it's the lights from the helicopter that's also capturing the fight. So it's like in darkness, but the light, like because he's so pale, that accentuates their differences as well. Which is
exactly,
really cool.
There's like these filmmakers they knew what they wanted and they made sure they got it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some shocking things in there. I don't want to ruin it because I really would like Jay to watch this, and you too, Jeff, because it is one of the best horror films I've seen in a long time. Not just werewolf
really
films, because it's just barely on the fringe of werewolf as far as I'm concerned. But it is just such an elegantly put together film. It's not perfect by any means, but it certainly is. It was my favorite watch of the week.
Cool.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
sounds really interesting.
I've been meaning to watch it for years. I've had that sitting around for a long time, and I was hoping to get to it this week, but nope, didn't happen.
It's not like you didn't watch a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to a lot. So.
I did.
Do not feel bad.
That's the worst part is it's like, okay, I did 14 and I feel like I didn't even hit the really great ones. So there's so many. There's so many. But it's one of my favorite genres as far as the classic monsters go.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun to go back and sort of really dig into the werewolf genre because unless you're watching them sort of like en masse like we did this week, it's easy to forget how many different variations of the story there really are. And I mean, not one of my movies resembled any of the other movies.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Some of them were very tropey and sort of the myth that we know, and then some took it in a completely new direction, like and even Blood and Chocolate did to a certain extent because it really did dig more into the pack than sort of the individual scary werewolf. My last movie, oh man, if you want to talk train wrecks, I watched one just because of its title. I didn't do any reading on it until I watched it. It's called The Rats Are Coming, The Werewolves Are Here.
Oh my God. Wow. All right.
Yeah.
How was it?
Let's put it this way. It had a budget of less than $10,000 in 1972.
It's got a $10,000 title.
Yes. That is the best part of the movie because it's shot on film ends. This director, he scrounged film ends and just shot short scenes on whatever film he had left.
Amazing.
So you see quality change throughout the movie as he uses different film stock. It's
economical.
He's one of sort of his name is Alan Minchin, I think his name was. He's kind of famous in the grindhouse subculture because he was so good at making these low budget movies that he had like 20 some movies that he made for all of them for under $10,000 a piece.
Man, good for him.
None of them are good. From what I was able to read after watching this movie, but it was another one of those films where it's about the werewolf as family, but it was really unclear as to what was actually happening because it focuses on sort of the youngest child in a family of werewolves, and she's brought her new husband home that she didn't get permission to marry. So there's this conflict between her father, who's almost 200 years old, and this young 21-year-old woman who wants to be married to this young man, but he doesn't approve and won't give his approval. He won't even meet him. And that's sort of the whole concept of the story is her trying to get this approval. At least that's the way it seems on the surface. But she's got a secret because she's pregnant and she doesn't want her child to grow up in a werewolf family. So she goes through the sort of whole process to ultimately bring down but there's like the other members of the family. There's the oldest sister who's been she's the matriarch of the family and she sort of keeps everybody under control. But the movie starts with them setting one of their family members on fire.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then putting him out. And
what?
Yeah. It's like they set him on fire, then they put him out for no apparent reason. It's like the directors I want to do a burn, so we're going to do it right at the beginning of the movie. And we're not going to explain why it happened, why we did it, what his purpose was. Yeah, then the character's like locked in his bedroom because he's the most feral of the family and he's more wolf than person kind of thing. And he's the only one throughout the whole movie who ever looks remotely werewolf-like. There's no transformations. There's no special effects in this movie aside from that burn. And then the rats. The rats are supposedly alien rats that are coming to Earth, but they weren't part of the original script. They were inserted in after Willard's, the success of the movie Willard. They're like, oh, rats. Let's stick rats in with the werewolves and make a whole nother movie. So they're kind of a blink and you miss it kind of. But yeah, it's just It's just a mess.
Crazy.
Yeah, which is why I ended up watching American Werewolf in London, because I wasn't going to, but I'm like, I need something
You
good
need
to
a
end this
palate
week
cleanser.
off with.
It's the werewolf versus alien thing. I really kind of like that.
Well, and that's, like I said, like, it sounded interesting just based on the title and the one-line synopsis. I'm like, oh yeah, this could be fun. And then I watched it.
Yeah. That's happened to all of us.
It has happened to all of us, and again, it's like my first watch, and then what would have been my last watch were kind of bookended movies that had interesting synopsis that definitely did not deliver. Just it's available on YouTube. If you feel like torturing yourself, have at it. I would not recommend it. So while we were talking there, I did do a little bit of research to confirm the name of the director, and I'm sorry I was completely wrong. It was actually Andy Milligan. I don't recommend watching his films, but definitely look him up, read his biography, because he's a fascinating man, and I think he's a far more interesting character than anything that he wrote in any of his movies. So, yeah, do that. At least take a look at his history.
Well, even these guys who might not be the best filmmakers in the world, you got to admire that they're getting out there and doing it and trying it. So, if nothing else, hopefully they'll learn from the experience. Okay, it's time to move on to Trish. What did you watch this week?
Okay. Well, as we were discussing before, I watched Where, and I really liked that. That was my first one.
Mm-hmm.
And from that, I'm like, oh, I don't really want to go down something I don't know. And I went to something I enjoyed, which was Cursed from 2005.
Oh, man, that is also a movie that's got fascinating history because, like, that movie, correct me if I'm wrong, was the one that got filmed and then filmed again. They just had to go back and refilm it with a new cast.
I think so. Yeah, it's Wes Craven and Christina Ricci, Jesse Eisenberg, and let's see, Dawson's Creek.
Yeah, I remember it having an amazing cast, but I don't remember it being particularly good.
I liked it. It's so dumb. It's fun. It's Scream with werewolves.
Yeah,
it's really entertaining.
It was the same writer, wasn't it?
I think so. Yeah, so it's exactly that, really, honestly. And yeah, and it's got Judy Greer's in it, and I love an evil Judy Greer. It's pretty awesome. It's a lot of dumb fun. Like I say, I enjoy it. It's not the greatest movie, and some of the effects, though, I have to say, are pretty good. I did enjoy them. Oh, it's also a lovely, fluffy golden retriever is turned into a werewolf at some point, an evil dog, which is kind of fun as a concept. But yeah, I don't know. She works for the Craig Kilborn show. So what's funny is when you're watching this, you're like, oh yeah, that used to be a big show. So it is kind of dated in that regard. Yeah, no, I don't know. It's a good fun one. I'd say if you just want a dumb fun werewolf movie, it's a good watch. And then for number 3, I watched The Howling, which we've already touched on. And then number 4, I did Howling 6, The Freaks.
Oh, man. Okay. And here we go, because I haven't seen past Howling 3 that I can recall. I mean, it's possible.
Went from first gear.
Oh, my. It's... how do it...
Didn't that one and like the 5 come out like the same year?
I think so, yeah. And this was direct to video.
Yeah.
I don't think anything past 3 was in theater release. And I've seen 3, and 3 is dumb fun. If you just watch it, it's good dumb fun. Like 3 isn't great, but it's also terrible, but in the best way possible.
Mm-hmm.
This one it's a hodgepodge mesh. I can see where they were starting from. I feel at certain points this would have benefited from having been a period one, like a lot in the past. But basically, it's this werewolf moving from town to town, ends up in this one small town, and behind him comes this circus with a freak show, which is run by a vampire who decides to take the werewolf as one of his freaks. And the werewolf has already fallen in love with the pastor's daughter.
It sounds like fun as a concept, kind of like my bookends.
Yeah, it's like, I think if this had been like an 1800s one, like with the freak show and the pastor's daughter, like it would have worked better. Like I feel like it just needed but it's like a modern day telling. So like the freak show thing really doesn't work, and it's...
Oh, did this come out in the 90s?
It's like 1991.
So with Jim Ross, and was that his name? The guy who around the time that Marilyn Manson's first album came out, there was that guy who was huge in the carnival scene. He like toured with bands and stuff. There's like a big 90s resurgence of like carnival sideshow culture, mostly because of this one dude. But I think that there's a lot of stuff that you'll see that like kind of cashed in on that a little.
Was that the guy who guested in that X-Files episode?
Yeah.
Oh, it might have been. That could be why. But it's really kind of interesting. There's a good sweet story. There's a side guy who's the alligator boy. And what's really fun is like at certain points, quite frankly, I was just really more interested in his story because he was quite unusual and interesting and basically the most sympathetic character of all of them. I didn't really care for the lead. I didn't care. And the romance just didn't work. It didn't feel authentic. But like, again, so many good ideas just sort of put into a pot and set to boil and hoped it became a good dish. But I mean, it's a good watch. Like, I think this is one we could kind of do in a different way. But again, but it's still eminently watchable. So not terrible.
Okay.
It's definitely not the highlight of the Howlings.
Well, there's quite a few of those.
Yes. And then my final one is called Wild Country. And it's a Scottish one. Peter Capaldi's in it.
Yes.
Yeah. What happens is it's this young Catholic teen, gets pregnant, forced to give up her baby. Peter Capaldi's like Father Steve. It begins with her giving birth to the baby, and they take it out, and she's given it up. And then it goes on a little bit further, and she's going on an excursion, like a youth group excursion, with 3 other people. And Father Steve, Peter Capaldi, is like taking them out into the Scottish Highlands, tells them the story about these cannibals that live in the forest. And they end up, there's some weird, creepy locals, but there are these wolves that are out there. They end up hearing a crying baby in like a castle. And so they save it. And because she's just like, she's still giving milk like to this family who have the baby, and she's able to like she's nursing the baby. It's this whole other level of like a werewolf movie. So they're trying to avoid the werewolf but save this baby, and it's just a group of teenagers. And it's really freaking well done. The ending I won't give away, but it's pretty awesome. And I thought it was just fantastic. So I highly recommend. Like, all the young actors are amazing. I think they're really great.
Oh, kudos for hitting some unusual ones here.
Yeah, and it's just so, and it's Scottish. But the one thing that I didn't quite get about it, but I know it's because I'm North American, is not bringing an axe when you go camping.
Right.
I don't know why anybody wouldn't do that. But apparently
That's
in Scotland
baffling.
you wouldn't.
Well, yeah, you need to cut wood and kill the zombies. Like, come on.
I know, but they don't.
I mean,
They
not
don't
having
have
an axe in the trunk of your car, even.
Right? Yeah, I don't know what the deal is. I think it's just because they got those little portable propane stoves, and they just have, one guy has a switchblade, and that's it.
Well, they can whittle down something to make a fire with.
Exactly. They're setting themselves up for failure.
All right, well, yeah. They don't
But
know how
yeah,
to camp.
actually, my bookends were great. Highly recommend. This one's pretty good.
Cool. I guess that leaves my gigantic list here, but we've already scratched off quite a few. Actually, we crossed one off last week when we talked about Silver Bullet when Sam did it. I thought I had never seen it. Turns out I did. But
nice.
And like Sam said, it's a little cheesy now. It's watching a little dated, but man, I really enjoyed it. It's so much fun. And King just brings some life into these characters. Even at a young age, Corey Haim was quite good. I think he was a better actor as a kid than he was as an adult.
Agreed.
And Gary Busey was his usual insane. He looked more like classic Busey at that point, which is weird because that movie came before his Lethal Weapon appearance, and he looked all ripped there. And then you watch Silver Bullet, and he's like, "Yeah, there's Fat Busey." there's Beer Belly Busey. So I'm not. It was worked out like a motherfucker for that role. But it's a lot of fun. It's got a lot of humor, and the werewolf stuff has some tension to it. It's fun. It's a classic, and I highly recommend it. We talked about it last week, so I'm not going to get too much into it. I highly recommend it. It was a great way to start the week. And because this one was touted as a combination of Silver Bullet and Gran Torino, I made that my next movie. I kind of did these weird logical pairings, so they'll be each day kind of had a logic to it. So this one was by director Adrian Garcia Bogliano, and it starred Nick D'Amici and Ethan Embry. I'm a big fan of Ethan Embry, but he's kind of wasted as this dude's son. Nick D'Amici was this blind veteran and father to Ethan Embry, and he's just an ass for the most part. But his dog was killed at the beginning of the movie by a werewolf, and he slowly tracks down and preps to take this beast on as a blind man.
Nice.
What was the movie called, Jay?
Late Phases.
I was going to try and watch it. I didn't manage to get to it.
You know what? It is. It's well reviewed, but I thought the thing was boring. The creature effects were meh. Sometimes the werewolves look good, and other times it's like, ooh, that doesn't look so good. But I guess that kind of comes with these lower budget movies, that you're building tension around the character, and since we're glued to this unlikable character, and I kind of was bored, and I didn't like our main protagonist despite the interesting aspects to the character. I didn't dig this one very much, to be honest, but it reviews fairly well, so I might be in the minority on this one. But there's that Nick D'Amici vampire movie that he did. I didn't like that one either, so, and people say it's pretty good. I didn't like it either, so maybe it's Nick D'Amici.
Might be.
Since I didn't like that one that much, the next day I went on to a couple UK favorites. One I just covered at our last 31 Days of Horror, but I wanted to revisit it again. The first one up was Dog Soldiers, written and directed by Neil Marshall, with a good UK cast of Sean Pertwee and Kevin McKidd, Emma Cleesby, Liam Cunningham. This one's great. It is basically all the wonderful aspects of Aliens and Predator and that survival horror with these soldiers that were dumped into an exercise but wind up being attacked by werewolves, and this small military crew that was trying to capture one and weaponize it, but doesn't go so well.
Yeah, I would say that that movie is Dog Soldiers is firmly Aliens meets Night of the Living Dead, but with werewolves.
Yeah, because they're kind of trapped in the cabin the whole time. It's never boring.
No, it definitely is not.
It's got some great sense of humor to it when it needs it. That's something Neil Marshall's really good at, is reducing the tension just to build it back up again, put you off guard when another attack happens. Great stuff. There's not much to it as far as subtext goes. It is an Aliens movie, but with werewolves. More hair.
Yeah, there was an episode of the new Creepshow series that made me think of Dog Soldiers. Do you remember that one, Trish?
I do.
Yeah.
They find somebody, it's during the war, they find somebody in a cell, and the person in the cell is like, no, you have to leave me here. It's a woman, isn't it? It's in France?
It's a woman, yeah.
Yeah, and that there's a whole soldiers thing, and they kill Nazis. It's great.
It is great. Turn them into werewolves so they can get out of the jam they're in. It's really well done. I think it was my favorite one of the new series, actually.
Yeah, it's like reversing, like in Dog Soldiers, they're outside wanting to get in, and in the Creepshow, they're inside to get out.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I feel like American Werewolf in London, they like touched on it maybe a little bit because they had the Nazis in the dream sequence. But I feel like werewolves and Nazis together are a combination that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like it's strange that there's not more werewolf Nazi stuff in movies or anything.
Well, that's what I mentioned at the top. Wolf Bitch of the SS. Isn't that like a grindhouse thing?
Well, that's She-Wolf of the Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS, and she wasn't a wolf, but that one still is a grisly movie. I used that for one of our movie trailer Go-Go's, and having actually watched the trailer, I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch this movie. Yeah. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I don't have any desire. I just know the title.
It's like Schindler's List meets Hogan's Heroes. Meet Animal House.
Meet Cannibal Holocaust.
That is a horrifying combination.
Ooh.
That's one of these werewolf movies, and I'm trying to remember which one was actually directed by the same director as Animal House.
John Landis?
That was it. It was American Wolf, London. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
One of the most explosive, brutal, and purely enjoyable horror debuts since The Evil Dead. Genuinely frightening. Jaws, Aliens, and Predator with a werewolf twist. Absolutely brilliant. Thrilling. Mind your tongue! Exciting. Scary.
I don't scare that easy.
And funny.
I'm sold.
A horror film with bite.
You are.
Sold! I'm in the closet! Bitch of a werewolf movie. Lycans! Dog soldiers. It'll blow your house down.
So my next UK werewolf movie was Howl from 2015, directed by Paul Hyatt. And this is an ensemble cast. They're basically passengers on this train. And this isn't a typical, like, city subway system. This goes between cities, I think.
Yeah.
Trish is a little more familiar with how the UK transit system is, and that is for commuters to other towns, isn't it?
Yeah, you have like the London Underground, and that's like city within, and then you have above ground trains that can go to like kind of the suburbs and out in the middle of nowhere, and it's regular for them to be running. So yeah, and that was on my 31 Days of Horror. I did watch this as well, like last October, and yeah, no, this is realistic. Like people will get on a train and they'll be going home.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of subtext here. You got different people with different temperaments, and lots of conflict as this train is stopped in this middle of this forested area, and is attacked by a werewolf, and it turns into survival and a lot of conflict within the characters on the train. Kind of watches like the Stephen King's Mist or any of those type where people are trying to survive, being trapped inside, even Night of the Living Dead. So a lot of conflict comes from within more than from without. But inevitably with these horror movies, it's a last man or last woman standing scenario.
Yeah, I found that one a lot more interesting while they were still on the train. The dynamic between the people on the train.
I felt the same way.
Than as soon as they got off the train, it kind of derailed a little bit for me.
Mm-hmm.
Hey.
We got one in. Is that the first pun?
And it was me, and I never do that.
Yes.
And it wasn't a wolf joke, it was a train joke.
Stealthy.
And I think this
movie... not the train of thought we thought.
But they were a little different with their werewolves in this one, too, because they went with more of the universal flat-nosed werewolf on that one. So the next day, I'm like, all right, well, I've always wanted to watch this movie. It was called I Was a Teenage Werewolf from 1957. It was my oldest one. Yay. And I had never seen it before. It was with Michael Landon. This is the only time we get to see Michael Landon being a real dick.
Yes.
Michael Landon's always a dick.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, think about it. Okay, the one where he was the angel, he's just like pompous guy walking around telling people how to live a better life.
Oh yeah, he's judgy.
And then even in Little House on the Prairie, he's like the holier than thou patriarch of a family that's better than every other family in the community.
Okay, well, he was legendary snob in his roles. In this one, he's just an asshole.
Okay.
He's a troubled youth, 1957, the troubled youth, and they want him to go see a psychologist because he's getting into some violent altercations. And this hypnotherapist uses him as a guinea pig and uses this serum on him, which transforms him, his inner rage to his outer rage, and transforms him into a werewolf. And he's not controlled by the cycles of the moon or whatever, so he's out in the daylight. So this werewolf with a collegiate jacket is attacking people. On the surface, it's actually a pretty dark movie, except it's 1957, so it doesn't come off as dark as it would. But when you're watching it, I'm like, oh, this is there's no light on this one. It's dark with a bit of silly idea of how this actually happened. And now that I consider it, it might be prime one for a remake down the road. But conceptually, it's not a bad idea.
Well, I think they did, in a way, remake it. There's a comedy movie called Full Moon High with Adam Arkin, and it's the comedic version of I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Well, I'd say my next watch was probably the remake, and that is Teen Wolf from 1985.
Yes.
Starring Michael J. Fox, of course, and James Hampton, Susan Orsini, and Jeremy Levine. It is, I think, an 80s classic for most people. Me being somebody who loves werewolves, I like Michael J. Fox stuff for the most part. Everybody was into him once he left Family Ties. He was kind of the it guy for a few years, and it was in all sorts of stuff, but nothing quite hit like Back to the Future. But Teen Wolf wound up getting a sequel, not with Michael J. Fox, mind you. It was Jason Bateman, I do believe. And then it spawned a cartoon, and of course a more recent TV series that was a little more Twilighty. But I went back to this one. I didn't really remember it, and I'm like, oh, I remember why I didn't go back to this. I don't like this movie. I've never liked this movie. The humor never quite lands for me in that movie. I don't know. I don't like dumb humor, and this one was dumb humor. But here's this kid who's growing up, and his father is a werewolf, and he's inherited the trait. And as a coming-of-age movie, in a lot of ways, this is a comedic version of Ginger Snaps, where he's the coming-of-age, and suddenly these aspects of lycanthropy has emerged in him, and it's given him a newfound confidence that he didn't once have. And it's a struggle of finding it. He's completely come out of the closet of being a werewolf, and he's very readily accepted within his peer group because of it. Girls like him. He's a star on the basketball team because he can do things nobody else can, but he's also alienating his friends along the way, and that's where the classic comedy storyline comes in, where he has to redeem himself near the end and does the final basketball game as his human self, and giving the same confidence back to his peers on the team, and also winning back his friends in the long run by showing it's like, hey, I am a team player, and I do care about you people, and I lost my way for a little bit.
Yeah, it covers, it's very much that sort of teen story of the mid-'80s. Mm-hmm. But there's like, okay, well, we're going to make a werewolf movie, but it's just going to be that same coming-of-age story. Yeah. They just ticked all the boxes. Yeah, they did. It was typical teen comedy, and I rolled it through the whole thing.
They start off with a werewolf. Now let's see. He's unpopular, becomes popular, gets the popular girl, then realizes that the unpopular friend they've had all along was the love of their lives.
That is it, except to add werewolf to that formula. Yep.
But I have to say, there's only one bit of it that I really, really liked, where he's transforming in the bathroom. He's like, Dad, I don't think you'll understand what I'm going through. And then it's the door, and his dad is like the cutest, fluffiest werewolf.
That was pretty good, actually. That was a good scene. But, in my childhood memory, and I didn't even want to figure out if it was still true or not, but my childhood memory, I think I liked the sequel more than I liked the first one. But that said, after this one, I didn't want to revisit it. So,
no.
Yeah, I'll leave that to everybody else out there. But I know this is a childhood favorite for a lot of people, so you're welcome to like it. I don't. I still don't. I tried. Well, I thought my adult eyes would like it better. Nope. No.
Oh, your adult eyes will like it less. So I'm telling you, if you did like it as a child, do not watch it again.
Yeah, it might ruin it for you, because I find it never quite lands as a comedy. All right, my next two were the next day that was part of my Canadian contingent and my really silly werewolf day, and we've already talked about Wolf Cop and another Wolf Cop, so I'm not going to get into it, but those were the first two, but I did one more. Yes, ooh. I did 3 in one day on that one, and my third movie of the day was Bubba the Redneck Werewolf.
I have not heard of that. Tell us all about it. That sounds amazing.
Okay. So, Bubba, it is a redneck county in a redneck town, and
Alberta?
A little more south. Lot more south. And yeah, he just wants something better for himself and his life. He's kind of, it's stale and dead end, and he doesn't feel like he's attractive. He's lost his girlfriend to his chief rival, and he lost her months ago. He's just pining on and trying to win her back. And he makes a deal with the devil.
Oh.
And the devil turns him into a werewolf. Now, because the devil's been pulled into this town, he realizes, oh man, this is a smorgasbord of deals, and everybody's making bad decisions, and only Bubba can defeat the devil to free these people from their contracts. This one guy, he just wanted to be able to go down on himself with maybe an extra hand, get an extra hand on something. So he has an arm grow out of his head, but it's still too short. It can't reach.
Oh man!
He turns a nun into a real slut. Trying to remember what else, other transformations, but I had a lot of fun with this one. It was based on a comic book that even I didn't know about, so it must have been a really underground, local, distributed type of thing, because I was completely unaware of this as a comic book in my industry. I know comics.
Yes, you do.
That's right. Words and Pictures, WNP.ca. Check it out. Plug. I mean, it's not a greatly made movie. And actually, the devil's played by the creator of the comic book, Mitch Hyman, which is interesting because I remember looking up the cast and I'm like, oh, he looks like a devil. And then he turns up. I'm like, oh, he actually is the devil in this movie. So just a bunch of guys that were having a lot of fun together, and they made a half-decent movie out of it. I think you can catch it on Tubi or Amazon Prime, so if you want to check it out. It's not great, it's dumb fun, but it is fun nonetheless. So yeah, I'd recommend this one. I mean, the werewolf doesn't change too much. He's still a redneck. He howls at the moon, but he has a little more strength, and it can get a little bloody at times. So I like how they use the gore and the humor at the same time, or, you know, he'll punch somebody's head off. And
oh my God. This is, okay, it's this is Wolf Cop meets Needful Things, where Ed Harris, who saves the day, is the Wolf Cop, and then Needful Things with the devil.
That's funny. I was doing the exact same thing.
It actually is. So it ties back to last week's episode as well.
Yay!
All right. The next day I got a little more serious, and I hadn't seen this in a very long time. I didn't really remember it. Bad Moon from 1996, based on the novel Thor by Wayne Smith, and this was directed by Eric Red, and it stars Mariel Hemingway and Michael Pare, and a beautiful German Shepherd named Primo, who is the central character, Thor. And this is a really interesting one, because Thor is the one that knows Michael Pare is the werewolf, and there's these weird stare downs, and this is like shifty-eyed dog staring at this guy. There's a lot of stare downs between Michael Pare and this German Shepherd. And he's misunderstood as like, okay, well, if a dog attacks a human being, then they should be put down or captured or whatever, because then they get a taste for blood. And the dog is sent away and has to escape to save his family, because Michael Pare initially he's trying to protect his family. He's just trying to hide out after being attacked from a werewolf and developing lycanthropy himself. He starts embracing his nature. In some ways, Thor is the one that keeps Michael Pare from attaching him. Like, he would chain himself to a big tree trunk during the full moons and stuff, or during the evenings. And one of these stare downs kind of delays him from doing that, and that allows Michael Pare to go and attack human beings. But yeah, I really like the idea of the dog being the central character, and this one I was actually surprised at how much I really enjoyed the movie, and I'm surprised I'd never really gone back to it. It was one of those movies I'd forgotten about, and it's actually a quite good werewolf movie. I kind of put it on par with Silver Bullet in that regard. They have similar feel and tone to it, and very 80s, but some of the best parts of the 80s, you know?
Nice. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, and I think that one was also on Prime. No, it was on Tubi. It is on a channel on Prime if you want to pay a little extra for a channel, but it's on free on Tubi. So, and the next movie of that day was Ginger Snaps, because it wasn't able to fit it in on Canada Day, the Canadian Werewolf Day of Wolf Cop, because I decided to go silly with that. So I did Ginger Snaps. We talked about that in length at the beginning of the program, so I'm not going to get into that again. But great movie, highly recommend it. The second movie is pretty good too. Third one, you can live without it.
It's like the Western Tremors. Like, it's just, there was a brief period of time where they're like the fourth or fifth movie in a series would be a Western.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, actually, that's a good segue because this next one kind of feels that way. Wolves from 2014, and I'm pretty sure Sam has seen this one. It stars Lucas Till, Stephen McHattie, John Piper Ferguson, and Jason Momoa. And this also has some of the best werewolf hair ever.
No, I have not seen this.
Really? Oh, this is actually
Really?
pretty good. Kid develops lycanthropy again. He's a born werewolf. So it's developed with his maturity, and he thinks he's accidentally killed his family. He's been framed for this and goes on the run. And he finds this small community that has a lot of werewolves, this pack run by Jason Momoa, who turns out to be his biological father because he was adopted. And lots of conflict as he's trying to free this town from the tyranny of this big werewolf. But and Stephen McHattie is a local farmer who's kind of got a piece with the werewolves because he's has I'm not sure if it's a friend or a daughter that was also purebred, and Jason Momoa wants a son to continue his line as he becomes older, a purebred son, not knowing he's already got one. So there's a lot of conflict there. And then there's this kind of outrider werewolf that Lucas Till meets early on, this kind of drifter werewolf who is the one that sent Lucas Till to this town in the first place, and he's been manipulating this thing through this whole time. So the real villain of the film is this dude, but we think it's Jason Momoa through most of it, and there's this like little turn to the good right at the end. But it's a fun little movie. I have to admit, I really quite enjoyed it, and this is the one where with the great hair and the female werewolf that I'm like looks different and has a different look to her, and is quite attractive even in her werewolf form. And they try to bring aspects of the person into the werewolf design, which I quite enjoyed because Jason Momoa's got those funky eyebrows, and they actually put that in the coloration of his fur in his when they did his head. So you always even recognize the werewolf as the actor. So
that's a great.
I got to see this now.
That's a great thing to do.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I really enjoyed it. It was actually the second time I've watched this movie, and quite enjoyed it. And the last stuff I watched yesterday, I had a plan to how to end my werewolf journey, and the very last movie was Wolfen, so I won't get into that again. But just before, my second last movie was The Company of Wolves, which is a really weird and interesting movie by Neil Jordan. Mm-hmm. The production design, this is a beautiful looking movie too, because it was designed by Anton Furst, and it was the one that got him noticed for Full Metal Jackets, and then he'd go on to work with Tim Burton on Batman. Unfortunately, he passed away at 47, but he would have been, well, he was already one of the great film production designers out there. I would have loved to have seen more of what he could have done as time went on, but this one stars Sarah Pattison. Angela Lansbury is an older character, and this is a weird little movie because it's like it's a dream of this girl in modern time, and she's dreaming of medieval times. So it's a story within a story within a story. So the characters within the dream start recounting other werewolf legends. Specifically, Angela Lansbury tells most of the stories. So there's these interesting vignettes. It's almost like an anthology movie, and it's dream layers. There's one with the devil shows up, and he's actually in a car and drives up to make this deal with his transient, but it's so out of time as well. So it's got a bit of dream logic to it. You got to pay close attention to it, and it's a weird little movie. It is easily one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen, but I've always loved it. I kind of like weird. you throw this kind of stuff where I'm just like, huh. And the final story, one of the final stories is basically Little Red Riding Hood, and that's the bridging characters that we see between the stories, and it becomes a story itself. And it's all inspired because of these wolves that are this pack of wolves underneath this sleeping girl's window. Doesn't end so well for her either, because I don't know if she was sick or whatever, because she was just sleeping through that whole thing and probably got eaten the way that movie ends. But it's a wild little movie.
Yeah, you just reminded me of one that I almost fits into the werewolf story because it's a retelling of Little Red Riding Hood. I was telling you about Freeway with Reese Witherspoon and Kiefer Sutherland, which is a really batshit retelling of the Little Red Riding Hood story, and I highly recommend it, even though it's not really a werewolf movie.
This was probably one of the first like Little Red Riding Hood werewolf movies I've seen. It certainly wouldn't be the last. I think there's another one just called Red Riding or something like that. I think there might even be a couple in that franchise, which is a werewolf franchise. So they've done it, but this was one of the more interesting versions of, because they don't give it, and they stick pretty much to the story dialogue as well. So, but they use it in such interesting ways. Yeah, I highly recommend, if you like the werewolf genre, check out A Company of Wolves, because it's a very different version of it, if nothing else, for the wedding banquet, as everybody has been turned into wolves during that scene. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember the wedding. That's one of the things that still stands out for me in that movie. It's been a long time since I saw it last.
Yeah, that was always one of the scenes that like sticks in your brain. There's something about the way that's set up, and I mean the whole look of the movie, it really sits with you, and you can see why Anton first went on to such big projects afterwards, because even though a lot of people don't know this movie exists, they didn't know then, they still don't. It's a pretty cool movie, and a lot of great careers came out of it. Obviously Angela Lansbury being the big star of this movie, but wasn't the lead character, but certainly the big name in the movie.
Yeah, and like you said, like the style of it, like I know when I'm watching this movie, like I can catch a scene and be like, oh, this is what's on right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what I'm in for.
No, there's a uniqueness to it that stands out in any era.
I kind of feel like if it was to be remade, it would be something that Sofia Coppola would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think she'd do good with that.
It's like that kind of, like it has a very like pompous type style, but like not in an arrogant way, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It's like very big and luxurious, but of a very antiquated time somehow.
Yeah, no, it's weird. It feels like a bit of classic cinema as well. I think for what keeps it from being a really great movie is there is some pretty dubious acting by certain actors in there. Some are great, but there's this one werewolf during the Red Riding Hood scene. He's a pretty bad actor. They must have picked him for his luxurious hair. That seems to be a theme. The luxurious hair of the werewolf.
Like, I wondered if he was a model who they cast to be an actor in this movie, but actually he's a model because it looks like it and acts like it.
Yeah, he looks like somebody who's probably an underwear model and has not a lick of acting skill.
Fabio.
Yes, very Fabio type. He came straight out of a romance novel cover.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that was it for my stuff. I ended with Wolfen, so we talked about that. But man, it was a fun week. I mean, no shortage of werewolf movies.
True. And Company of Wolves, that reminds me of, like, there's one section in Trick or Treat where they do kind of the Red Riding Hood thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's a very different take on the werewolf transformation that is disgusting but awesome.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, there are various transformations, even within that movie itself. Actually, Company of Wolves probably had one of the most disturbing ones, as one werewolf ripped off his own skin while he's transforming. So he's kind of ripping out of his own face. Actually ripped it off. And then this kind of, as he descended into wolf, you're seeing the muscle tissue and stuff stretch. And then the hairs start popping up as the wolf skin kind of takes over. But that's the thing. We've seen various versions of the transformation within all of these movies as well.
The one in Wolf Cop is probably the most disturbing one to me.
Oh, yeah.
I imagine it would have been like to see that
Forgot about that
with a bunch of people.
What? So you had a problem with the penis swelling and then falling off?
and turning into a wolf penis? I didn't have a problem with it. It was just shocking. I I wasn't prepared for it.
Why would I warn you for that?
No, you shouldn't have. You were absolutely correct, but I still had to give you shit.
If I have to experience it, I'm certainly not going to give you a fair warning about it.
How did you like, wow, that's bold. Oh, wait a minute.
That was certainly had some of the boldest stuff in it.
Yeah, because it was bold, and then it does it achieves the effect it wanted, right? It's like
to shock you. Yeah.
It's like at first you're like, wow, I can't believe they did that. Whoa, wait a minute! It's like it has that effect on you, and it's really well done, even though it's clearly fake.
Both Wolf Cop and Bubba. Bubba doesn't show any genitalia, but they both allude to the fact that these werewolves are very well endowed and is pretty good in the sack because of it.
Yeah, I don't know. A wolf penis is going to be, it should be canine. I'm sorry. It really should be like that. It should be the lipstick. I'm sorry. It looks weird otherwise.
Red rocket, red rocket, red rocket.
Yeah, which seems weird. But yeah, no, that's another thing. Like 2 legs or 4 legs, flat face or curved face, and then it's penis or no penis. Mm-hmm. That's another thing that's usually a choice in a movie.
Yeah, that's the great thing about Company of Wolves. It has all sorts of versions. Ones that fully transform into wolves, others that kind of have that bipedal version, and they kind of represent a lot of myth. They also bring back the mythology of the eyebrows meeting. They really hammer that old one home. Yeah. I mean, that stretches back to I think like Rome, so or at least France during those dark days. So interesting to see how the old mythology of this ancient cryptid has endured for hundreds of years and is now propagated into our film and has been redefined because of film. Vampires went through a similar phase as well. Maybe one day we'll cover that. But this was a fun exploration of werewolves in film, and we only covered a small part of the werewolves in film. I mean, I could have probably just done a week of the stuff Universal's done.
Yeah, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman is one of my favorite werewolf movies too. They're all good.
Yeah, Trish and I have covered Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which has that classic Wolfman in it. We've also done an entire episode comparing the original Universal Monsters Wolfman to its remake. So if you like werewolves, we do have other options in our library as well. So go check out those episodes.
Yeah, we're very furry friendly.
Mm-hmm. Some friendlier than others.
Yep.
So if you've liked this interlude of specials that we've done and you'd like us to tackle another theme, maybe we'll do that sometime in the future. What would you like us to talk about? What type of film would you like us to investigate? Either a genre or maybe a filmmaker's filmography. Let us know. At Invasion Remake on Twitter, Invasion of the Remake on Facebook and Instagram, or you can email us, invasionoftheremake@gmail.com. And don't forget to make some suggestions for fan challenges as well. We've done quite a few this year, so I'm glad to hear your voices giving us some ideas for remakes. We did have one recently that I had to turn down because he wanted us to do, what was that one? Was it A Quiet Place? The one with the invisible alien?
Yeah, it was A Quiet Place, Jay,
Yeah, it was A Quiet Place. And I'm like, that's a pretty fine film. I mean, it does have its flaws, but it's a pretty fine film, and we tried to stay away from recent films because if it is a bad film, well, I don't want to kick it while it's down. That's just mean. It'd be only minor tweaks to a good movie, so I feel like that will leave to other podcasts, and we'll try to stick to the older ones and some of the more forgotten films that are worth revisiting as a remake. Too early to do something like A Quiet Place. Talk to me when I'm in my 60s, and maybe I'll have an idea.
Yeah.
But I probably won't be doing
voting age.
Yeah, that's right.
There's already so many remakes. Like, do we want to do it like out of the gate? I mean,
yeah.
Honestly, like, just re-release it if you think that it has to be done again.
Yeah. Unless I figure they really fucked up, and so far I've stayed away from doing that because, like I said, don't kick a dog when it's down.
Yeah, that's just mean.
It is. It's just mean. Don't kick a dog when it's down. Make sure you recommend the podcast to your friends and family, and you can find us at our central hub, invasionofthemake.libsyn.com, or our brand new Wix site. Sam, what is the address of the Wix site?
It is invasionofthemake.wixsite.com/podcast.
And of course, we're on all of your favorite podcast providers. Of course, Libsyn, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. We're now on Spotify, and we're even on frickin' YouTube. Goddamn YouTube. So check us out. It's no excuses. You can literally find us everywhere, and we're hoping we're entertaining you within this rather nasty 2020. So stay healthy, stay safe, and we're going to get back to our regular episodes soon. But we're having fun with these interludes, these specials. We get to just kind of fly free and talk about things a little more loosely, and that can be fun for us too. Thanks for joining us. I've been Jason.
I'm always Sam.
I continue to be Trish.
I always return as Wolfman Jeff Omega.
And we are out of here.
Little girls, this seems to say, never stop upon your way. Never trust a stranger friend. No one knows how it will end. As you're pretty, so be wise. Wolves may lurk in every guise. Now, as then, 'tis simple truth. Sweetest tongue has sharpest tooth.